Okay, there is a whole bunch to talk about that is circulating the MMA YouTube community right now that we definitely got to talk about because really we got to see where we are holding with the UFC in 2025. Like I really thought when they announced their summer pay-per-view lineup, the headliners, that the UFC was no longer fumbling 2025 and that we were going to have a great rest of the year, all the right matchups, stacked cards, and the rest of the 2025 was going to be great because the beginning of 2025 has been mediocre. And lo and behold, the UFC has still continuing to give us these mediocre and below average pay-per-views that are definitely not worth the full asking price of $80. And the UFC is slapping American fans in the face when you look at the cards that they put on for the Middle East, like UFC Baku and UFC Saudi Arabia's Fight Night, which they just announced, which we're going to look at very soon. But you gotta just take a step back and just see how like disrespectful the UFC has been to American fans, the American US population, and UFC fans here as of late, because the pay-per-views that they have lined up for us in the summer are actually really not that great. I just think that each one of these cards honestly is a good collection of fights. It's great all-around fights, but these cards are one or two big fights away from then being a stacked card, they're one gigantic name away, like two big ranked names from being good cards, right? You look at 317 right now, because we got to talk about this one first. This is coming up very, very quickly. About to make one of my favorite type of videos, the Fight Week video, where we go through the card, right? All that it's riding on really is Topuria and Oliveira, and then you have a cool co-main event in flyweight with Alexander Pantoja, Kai Kara-France, right? So everything's really up here of interest. And then after that, and really it's starting to fall apart. Kai Kara, Joshua Van stepping in on 3 weeks' notice to take on Brandon Royval. Huge jump in competition for Joshua Van. And I'm going to talk about that in the Fight Week video as to who I think. But Joshua Van is stepping in. Savage move for Joshua Van to step in. And of course, when you get an opportunity for number one contenders fight, how can you turn that down? So Manel Kape is out. As you can notice, there's one fight missing from the main card because Paulo Costa and Romy Kopylov is out now. So that is apparently going to be taking place now in 318 in New Orleans. And I personally was not that interested in that fight. I really couldn't care less about Romy Kopylov or Paulo Costa. People were saying, it's going to be a great fight. Roman Kopylov is supposed to tag up Paulo Costa. He's supposed to be like a punching bag, whatever. Renato Moicano, Benil Dariush, okay, cool fight, rebooked after January, after it got put to the side because Renato had to step up. It's a cool fight. I really think that this card is lacking one more big ranked named fight of like some bigger names to make this card a complete card. Because honestly, the prelims are pretty good. They just added on Peyton Talbot versus Felipe Lima, which is a really good prospect fight. Peyton Talbot coming off a huge loss in which he was heavily favored to Ronnie Barcelos, who just picked up another win versus Cody Garbrandt. So Peyton Talbot looking to bounce back versus a surging guy in Felipe Lima. This is a phenomenal fight. It's a little bit questionable because if you're trying to build up prospects, right, and pack up, and if you want to feed Peyton Talbot another guy to kind of get him back in the win column and build him up with a highlight KO. But I kind of like the matchup too. It's like, that's it. Throw them in. One of them is going to come out on top and continue to build on his hype and momentum. And if Peyton Talbot loses, he's on a 2-fight win streak. That kind of kills everything you're trying to build with Peyton Talbot, who's supposed to be this exciting striker. Not sure if this fight is still put together. Justin Tafa versus Renata Diniz. I think Justin Tafa might have fell off. Thank God they took that off the main card when they originally put on the graphic for 316. It said that was the card opener. Justin Tafa should never be on a main card in 2025. And Rodriguez versus Jack Hermanson. Apparently, Borshev versus Terrence McKinney supposed to be on here. Who else? What else is the name? Jacoby Smith is another big prospect. It's supposed to be on the prelims. They're putting together last-minute prelims for the 317 card. I mean, it would be amazing if they could just announce something last minute to put on this main card, because it desperately needs it. Like, it's really not that good of a card. This is supposed to be UFC 317, International Fight Week. The biggest card of the year. It's supposed to be the biggest card. And this does not have that big card feel. Everything is riding really on to Poirier Oliveira to sell it. And that's really the big intriguing fight. There's nothing else. Remember, like, dude, I was making in my other video what the UFC should do with 317. I had Hazmat versus Dricus and Topuria versus Oliveira on there with like a Kyle Baralio featured fight and Mauricio Ruffi to open up the card. My expectations were so high as to what they could do with this card, and instead you just get this. Kai Kara-France Pantoja, okay, cool. That's a cool co-main event. Pantoja's a cool champion, dominant flyweight champion. Flyweights will always be like, I guess, the co-main event title fights. But at least one more big fight above this Renato Moicano Benil Dariush. I thought that Kyle Baralio versus Nasruddin Imavov would have been perfect. Now, apparently that fight is going to happen because Nasruddin Imavov tweeted at Kyle that the plans have changed. He's no longer the backup. So maybe, just maybe, we'll get to that actually in a minute. That's 317 for you right now. This obviously is not complete. They're going to update it probably very soon because it's really just next week already. It's almost a Topuria Oliveira fight week. I mean, for this fight alone, like, but like, I forgot what it's like to have a card where every single fight on that main card is hype. Like, the craziest run that we went on last year was like peak UFC 298, 299, UFC 300. Those were the best, craziest cards. And that was just right at the beginning when I was finally like starting to taste how good the UFC is and getting the enjoyment from watching it. So to come into 2025 and start a YouTube channel and start reacting to it and talking about it, being excited for all the biggest matchups, it hasn't been happening. This could have been a Makhachev versus Topuria mega fight. It ain't happening. The card's not even a stacked card. I was going to give it maybe an 8.8, 8.7 Cop, and Paulo Costa versus Romy Kopylov fell off it right now. So I would rank this card 317 like a 8.3. Probably even less, like in the sevens, right? Then you look at 318, bro. This is crazy. You would think that a BMF title fight, they would stack up the rest of the card. Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway. Okay, that's going to be a fun bar burner fight, is what it is, to Poirier's last fight. Listen, they built this entire pay-per-view around Poirier's retirement fight, right? So it is what it is. Send off Poirier the right way. Gets walked off by Lil Wayne. Hopefully we just get the most entertaining fight possible. And you would expect them to stack up the rest of this card every time. Every time I really think the UFC is going to stack up a card, it's just disappointment. Apparently Marvin Vettori versus Brendan Allen is the co-main event. If anything, this is a featured fight or a second fight on a main card. This is not a co-main event. Just because there was some beef in a casino and this and that, these dudes are not a co-main event material. It's just not it. Marvin Vettori versus Brendan Allen. Then Neil Magny versus Gunnar Nelson. This is like a prelim. This is maybe like a main card opener or second fight on an Apex card. This is disgusting. If this is really how they're doing this. Again, this card needs one more nice fight to make it somewhat acceptable. If they put like Gene Silva versus Diego Lopez on this. They didn't even announce Pitbull or Ige yet. I think that was supposed to be put on here. Okay, Islam Tuladov is making his debut. Supposed to be one of the biggest prospects. Ikram Eliskerov versus Bruno Ferreira. This is actually a sick fight. Vinicius Oliveira versus Kyler Phillips. That's probably a main card fight. And then Atiba Gautier, sick prospect for prelims. You know, most of these fights are good fights, but they're prelims. This ain't main card material. It just ain't that stacked. And you would think that they would. And with the amount of fighters that you have on the shelf right now that could be booked for fights, and the way that you could design and work around these pay-per-views, they're putting too much into spreading everything out, making all these BS Apex cards, and like you could put so much more talent on these pay-per-views. It's so frustrating how the UFC has turned out in 2025 with these summer pay-per-views. Like, and then finally, if I go back and we go look at UFC 319, there's still room for UFC 319 to be great. There's still room for it, right? You got the Apex cards. Hernandez versus Dolidze, a good middleweight fight before one of the biggest fights we're going to get this year. One of the actual biggest fights that we actually got put together is Khamzat Chimaev versus Dricus du Plessis. Wow, this fight is going to be insane. This is beautiful right here. This better not fall apart. This is one of the biggest fights we're actually going to get, so it better not fall through in Chicago. And they announced a bunch of different fights on this card, all good fights. They're all they're not terrible. But if this is really how they're going to work a main card, it better not be. I mean, you got Jared Cannonier versus Michael Page. Really cool fight. Really cool fight for this card. And then Julio Sharp versus Michael Olszewski. That's a prelim. Drakkar Klose versus Ezen Barboza. That's like a prelim. King Green versus Diego Ferreira. That's like a prelim. These are all sick prelims if they're on the prelims. Brian Battle versus Nursultan Murziboyev. Brian Battle. Okay, cool. You just know that they're probably going to have these guys on like the main card. Like Kaya Sakura versus Tim Elliott. How is Kaya Sakura even ranked? He came in unranked to the UFC and lost in the immediate title fight he got versus Pantoja. I don't know much about Tim Elliott. These are a cool collection of fights. It's cool, but this needs one more big fight for it to really be a nice pay-per-view. Like, I'll put Holland and Covington on here. Put Nasruddin Imavov versus Kyle Borralho on here as the co-main event. Then it's a sick pay-per-view just with those two fights alone. Or put Ian Gary versus Sean Brady. If you put Ian Gary versus Sean Brady on here in between these two fights, honestly, I'm fine with the rest of the card. If there's one more good big fight between two highly ranked names, like a Sean Brady versus Ian Gary type fight, and then you got Cannonier Page, then I think it's a sick pay-per-view. And I'm not too mad at 319. I think 319 is already better than what we're getting with 318. And it's closely up there, like, I don't know, it's not fully announced yet. But when you look at it, when you look at Abu Dhabi, the way they just stacked up Abu Dhabi, right? This is insane, bro. This is such a smack in the face to us American US fans, bro. To put Robert Whittaker to Ritter, Movsar Evloev versus Aaron Pico, Peter Yan versus Marcus McGee. You got Bryce Mitchell going to make his featherweight debut versus Saeed Nurmagomedov. Shara Magomedov as well is on there versus Andre Bariut. This card is stacked to the gills. And then sick prelims, right? Bogdan Guskov versus Nikita Krylov. That actually should be on the main card, maybe. Muslim Salikov. Asu Almabayev versus Ramazan Temirov. This is crazy. This fight night is better than all three pay-per-views that we just went through. It's better than 319. It's better than 318. And it sure as heck is better than 317. This could be a pay-per-view right here. And it's in Abu Dhabi. And you also know that they're going to give Abu Dhabi an insane card as well in October when they go there for a pay-per-view. This is just a fight night for them. This is just a fight night. Peter Yan as a featured fight. And then Movsar. This is crazy, bro. Movsar getting Aaron Pico. They actually went through with this. It's one of the dumbest fights, but Movsar should win again. And it's just wasted time for him to get. But if this really is now the indication that, okay, we're about to get a Yair and Volk title fight next. Yair really just got himself a title shot off of like basically nothing. It's disgraceful matchmaking. Like the UFC is making all the wrong matchups. They're not layering cards in the best way possible to make us excited for card. Like I just watched through UFC 316 and UFC Atlanta, and most of these cards, you know, it's not like every fight there's something in it. There's like, I don't know, you get some cool finishes here or there, but I miss the feeling of having a quality card where you go into that main card, you have some sick prelims, and then you go into that main card, and every single fight on that main card is a banger. And yeah, this is just, it's crazy how stacked UFC Abu Dhabi is compared to these other cards. To have Whittaker, Movsar, Peter Yan. Crazy card. Crazy Abu Dhabi. Oh my gosh. Yeah, like, so it's been a real issue in 2025 in terms of the quality pay-per-views we've been getting. I mean, for this fight alone, Khamzat Chimaev versus Dricus du Plessis, it's just so big of a fight that honestly, you know, most of this could be like forgiven, but still you would like to just have a crazy pay-per-view. And I've just been waiting on this and just waiting for them to finally give us some crazy pay-per-view in American hours. and they're just keeping it all for the Middle East. And yeah, bro, like, it's just UFC right now has been fumbling. They've been fumbling. They continue to fumble. And I mean, the headliners are good. The headliners are good, but the way the rest of the cards are, the way they're structuring the rest of these cards, it's just really like, it's not great at all. It's really not great. And yeah, we should expect better. I hope that like it's because this is the final thing before the streaming deal. So now when they go into the streaming, that's our only hope, is to hope that the new streaming deal will have a change take effect, where there's more creative and passion put behind putting bigger and better pay-per-views for this promotion, or Dana White will give the majority of his responsibilities to Hunter Campbell, because I feel like Hunter Campbell will care a lot more about this promotion under his name, while Dana White's dealing with all the other things with like power slap boxing, Canelo. Yeah, so that's pretty much the point of this video, is to just talk about like how like insanely disappointing these pay-per-views are. And at the end of the day, no matter what, we're always going to watch. I mean, I'm always going to watch this, either, no matter what, these cards, like, but it's just the UFC in a year where I really thought was going to be one of the biggest. It just continues to disappoint. And yeah, that's my thoughts on how we're dealing with the UFC right now going into the summer. So we'll see you guys in the next one when we talk about UFC 317, though.